I might not have as many check marks as Jana, but we're seeing some progress. I'm going to talk about Ontario and New York's efforts at meeting this objective, and the identified indicators that we're going to use to measure our progress. Specifically, you can break down our indicators into more or less two groups: those dealing with the sport fisheries and supporting sustainable recreational fisheries, and those that are addressing more production-based aspects as far as adult returns and wild production. Dealing with the fishery indicators is first. I'll be discussing an indicator that's looking at increasing angler catch of wild and stocked Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario and the Salmon River. So these are, we're going to be using creel information. The open boat fishery, Janet talked a bit about this, and you'll notice that I've adjusted it somewhat. This reflects catch rate per angler hour. It actually reflects catch rate per 100 angler hours. The catch rates for Atlantic salmon in Lake Ontario are quite a bit lower than the other salmonids that Janet presented. Also on this figure in black, there's 3 time stanzas for the tributary fishery in the Salmon River, New York. So overall, when we look at that time stanza from 2008 onward, we actually see, although it's quite a bit lower than the other fisheries, we do see an increase in catch rates in both New York and Ontario waters. And in 2012, there was a 50% increase in catch rates in the Salmon River. And it shows that basically the fishery is comparable when we're looking at the Salmon River and the open waters of New York State and Lake Ontario and our Ontario data. So we're seeing increased catch rates in New York waters, but it's still low compared to other species. We're also seeing increased catches in the Ontario fishery, but it's very low. We don't have data from Ontario tribs. We're looking at opening. Right now, Atlantic salmon is closed in our Ontario tribs, but we're looking at addressing that by having a catch and release season. And the Salmon River fisheries show signs of improvement. Now, the one aspect I haven't addressed here is that the Salmon River creel goes from September through to mid-May. There is quite a significant summer fishery that isn't captured, and anecdotal information from watershed biologists indicate that those catch rates are increasing. The contribution of wild adults to that fishery is currently not known. The next series of indicators will be dealing with more of a restoration production aspect to Atlantic salmon. We're looking at documenting survival and growth of juvenile stocked fish in Lake and Ontario tributaries, increased spawning returns of wild production in our restoration streams, Credit River, Duffins Creek, Coburg Brook, the Humber, Bronte, and the Salmon River. And New York has an indicator as far as looking to document increasing wild production in the Salmon River and increasing returns of wild mature fish to Beaver Dam Brook. I'll deal with the Ontario information first. We have a series of index programs and Ontario tributaries in our index streams. Fall electrofishing, looking at documenting growth and survival to the fall of fish stocked in the spring. Out migrant surveys in the Credit River, where we're looking to document survival through the winter and estimates of production moving up to the lake. And we have a series on Duffins Creek and in the Credit, we have fish weigh monitoring and resistance board weir monitoring to get an essence of adult returns. So this is some data that Jim and I collect in the fall. These fish, when we're sampling sections of the Credit River that are stocked in the spring with 2 gram fish, so they're spring fingerlings, and these are samples in the fall, subsequent fall. And you can see quite a bit of growth in several of the sites. This is data from the Credit River. So we're seeing quite a bit of growth. Now, of course, I've highlighted 2 sites that not all sites are the same. Not all sites give us the same sort of growth rates, and this will be reflected in many of our research streams. And Jim has an estimate based on size, based from the literature, on how many of those are likely to smolt the next year. And I have data that corroborates that information. This is out-migrant information from the Credit River. 3 years worth of data. Similar catches across multiple years. And when I see fish at the screw trap, that's that gear that's sitting in the river that I showed earlier. I'm not only documenting that there's not only survival and out-migration, but I'm also seeing the same sort of trends that Jim does as far as those tribs that are giving us high production. I'm also seeing those tribs are recruiting more to my gear than the other ones. This is a table I took from the annual report documenting our captures of adult salmon on the Credit River. There's 2 fishways, one at Streetsville and Norval. And this is more or less, our catch rates are low. Compared to the numbers of fish we put in, our catch rates range, are generally around 20 to 30 fish a year. The New York data, Jim Johnson does an index of juvenile production. These are wild fish in seining. He has several index sites that he seins. I don't know, Jim, what you sample them probably about 3 weeks or whatever, and you sample through that period looking at an index of wild production. And New York doesn't have a fishway on the Salmon River, but they do. The creel data that I already alluded to is a surrogate for adult abundance. Now, Jim's picked up wild production each year for 5 years, and so he's actually documented that. We haven't necessarily documented that in Ontario, but there are individuals, when I catch them at my rotary screw trap, that we can't quite designate to parentage. We have a genetic way of tracking whether they're hatchery fish, and there are some fish that haven't necessarily lined up with our hatchery individuals, so there's potential that there could be wild fish. Our survival and growth are good in our Ontario streams, but our returning adults, the abundance of those is poor, but it is kind of more of an opportunistic sampling. It's not a good index necessarily, so we could be underestimating the number of adults in the system. That's what you deal with when you're sampling returning adults. Potential wild production, that could be occurring in Ontario streams. Further genetic research or work needs to be done. Wild production has been documented in the Salmon River. The adult catch is increasing in the New York creel, but there's no formal index. And once again, the occurrence of wild adults in the Salmon River hasn't been documented. Now, the final Atlantic salmon indicator is a status trend indicator, and it deals with the establishment of self-sustaining runs of wild Atlantic salmon in Ontario rivers. And this likely should be more of a restoration indicator as opposed to a trend indicator, because it's longer term than what can be captured in 6 years for the state of the lake. So this is a longer term indicator. We're not meeting it currently, but it's something that will be ongoing, and hopefully with the program we'll be able to see progress towards this. But in the span of 6 years since the onset of the program, we're not meeting it yet. But we are making progress towards improving our restoration efforts. We've recently held a Lake Ontario Atlantic Salmon Restoration Science Workshop, in which we invited a series of outside experts from the East Coast, and we went through a synthesis of our accumulated science, and they're going to help us make recommendations and move forward with our restoration strategy. And with that, I'll take any questions.